Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about Michael Chandler after the cancellation of UFC 303's main event against Conor McGregor. But before getting started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. I believe the most frustrated person out of this whole situation has to be Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler has dedicated at least the past year to prepare for the fight against Conor McGregor. I want to venture out and say that this would have been Michael Chandler's biggest payday, at least in the UFC. I don't know about the guy's personal life and what he does in terms of finances, but I have 0% doubt that in terms of the UFC, this would have been his biggest payday. And when you're anticipating such big event in your life, an event that's going to change everything moving forward, you can't help but to make plans based off that fight and the outcome of that fight. Unfortunately, even if you don't want to, you're going to end up subconsciously thinking about what you're going to do with all the money that you make from fighting a guy like Conor McGregor. The biggest beneficiary from this whole situation, I would say, has to be Conor McGregor. Despite the alleged injury, I don't think Conor truly wanted to face Michael Chandler. With all respect to all the other opponents, but I believe if it was anybody else in that lightweight division, aside from a top 5 guy, I think we would have saw UFC 303's main event go on. With all respect to Conor McGregor here, this is not to disrespect Conor. This is to show how smart and witty Conor truly is. I've said about this particular thing many things before, but the style is like a controlled chaos sort of style. It seems like Conor McGregor is chaotic. It seems like Conor McGregor's decisions are irrational at times. But from him throwing something at a bus to him canceling a press conference and canceling a main event, all that does is capture the audience's attention. Everybody's talking about Conor. He knows how to sell a fight, that's for certain. But Conor McGregor is far from a dummy. He knew that the fight against Michael Chandler, aside from the inactivity, would have been the hardest fight of one of the hardest fights of his career, UFC career, that is. And that's saying a lot, given the fact that this guy faced guys like Poirier, Nate Diaz, and Khabib Nurmagomedov. I do understand all those 3 names cannot be mentioned in the same breath, but they're all greats in their own regard. Some might say guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov is a GOAT. A GOAT cannot be compared to other fighters, and I do agree in that regard. All I'm trying to say here is that Conor McGregor has fought some top guys, and despite the inactivity, even if Conor was active, the Chandler fight would still have been one of the most difficult fights Conor McGregor would have ever been involved in, and I think Conor realizes that. I think it was more of a business decision than anything else for Conor not to take part in this fight. Not to say that the fight's result was guaranteed for Chandler. I've said it. All of the activity and Conor's inactivity, I give Chandler, taking all that into consideration, a 1% advantage over Conor McGregor, just because Conor's still a top fighter and he still has that left hand, the left hand he knocked out Jose Aldo with. I do understand that many people would say that Conor's perhaps past his prime. This statement may be true, and it could also be at the same time a premature statement just because the guy is 35. So you never know when somebody can come back in there and conquer divisions again. I don't put it past the guy, but I know for certain that if Conor had the opportunity to choose anybody else to fight, like let's say for instance Tony Ferguson, that we would have saw UFC 303's main event go on without any interruptions, despite a toe injury or what have you. This leads me to say that I don't think that a 35-year-old Michael, I believe he's 35, mid-30, 35, 36, let's say 35-year-old Michael Chandler can truly afford to give another year of his life away waiting on a guy that's perhaps never going to step a foot back in the octagon, and that's Conor McGregor. I do understand I just said that the guy might come back and conquer divisions, but I said might. And he truly hasn't been active for the past 2 years. So what makes you think that he is going to come back? He was supposed to come back UFC 303, and that fell apart. So how can Chandler build his hopes on something that's so elusive like the idea of Conor's return? I believe Conor will step a foot back in the octagon if it makes sense for him. Not only financially, because I don't think financially is the only thing Conor's looking for right now. I don't think the finances is perhaps the number one priority for Conor when he thinks about fighting. It's more about getting wins. And I think picking and choosing opponents is the wise thing for Conor to do. I'm not saying that the injury excuse is nothing but that, an excuse. This is not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is that if Conor had the opportunity to pick his opponent, I don't think he would have picked Michael Chandler. I do understand that Chandler's record, if you look at it in terms of W's and losses, wins and losses, you're going to say that the guy doesn't have the greatest record in the UFC. You know, I think aside from his first fight. But that's not how things are measured. All of Michael Chandler's fights were close, and all of Michael Chandler's fights were against top contenders, not only in the lightweight division. Chandler came to the UFC and stepped a foot in the octagon with the best lightweights on the planet. I believe it was just right around the time of Khabib's departure. It was right around that time where Chandler signed for the UFC. And that's really that was the prime of that division. We all know that during those times, and still, this division is one of the deepest divisions in the UFC. I don't think it's quite the same as it was when Khabib was fighting, obviously, and when the Gaethjes and the Poiriers of the divisions were a couple of years younger. Not to say that these guys are slowing down, but effectively, Poirier and Gaethje, previously known as top contenders, are now both on losses, and that's the top of the division. Obviously, Arman Tsarukyan, Charles Oliveira is on a slight decline. I don't want to say quite decline. When it becomes 3 in a row, that's when I start to worry about fighters. But Charles Oliveira, former champion, coming off a loss. Arman Tsarukyan. Poirier just lost to the champion of the division, Islam Makhachev. Gaethje, the guy that I had a lot of hopes for in this lightweight division, was unfortunately knocked out by Max Holloway. With all respect to Max here, the BMF, for the BMF title, which left Chandler alone, and he lost to those guys. He lost to all of those guys, and Poirier beat Saint Denis. Saint Denis was on an uprise. I do understand that you have guys like Matthews Gamrot, and you can even say Saint Denis still in that mix somehow. He just needs to bounce back from his from the loss against Poirier. Apparently, the guy was dealing with some sort of problem heading into the fight with Poirier, which allegedly ultimately caused him the result of the fight. So we have to say that Saint Denis maybe, still has the opportunity to bounce back. Let's say Matthews Gamrot obviously is a fighter to look out for in that lightweight division. There are a couple of new names, obviously, but they're just that, new names. They have to prove themselves against the top of that division. And Chandler has been around long enough to have tested himself against the best of that division when they were in their prime. And unfortunately for Chandler, he fell short. He fell short to guys like Poirier, Oliveira, and so on. And all of those fights were close. All of those fights were fights he could have won. Unfortunately for him, he did not win. The Conor fight was not set at lightweight. It was set at welterweight. So it was out of the division. I don't think Max Holloway is going to be open to fight anybody else aside from Ilia Topuria within the next year or so. I do understand that Ilia wants that BMF title to be included. And I say that because I think it would incentivize Conor more if Chandler has a belt like the BMF title, and the only way he could probably get his hands on that BMF title is if he was to fight Max Holloway. And I just said that Max is pretty much booked against Ilia Topuria. This fight will probably happen end of the year 2024, so he can kiss that BMF title goodbye at least for the next 6 months to a year, so he can't afford to wait around for that. You can say that Chandler can wait for the winner of the Arman Tsarukyan Islam Makhachev fight and fight the loser of that fight. He can fight perhaps Benoit Saint Denis. He can perhaps even fight Garrett. But there aren't many fights that are open for Chandler, in all honesty. I don't see him against Poirier. I don't see him against Oliveira. I don't see him against Gaethje. Are those fights possible? Absolutely. But I don't see this happening. I don't see Chandler being interested in any sort of rematch. But I do understand the importance of Chandler staying active and not wasting valuable time in his career waiting on a guy that might not come back. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and like, subscribe for more.